Last week we discussed looking at comparing SQL objects, and we looked at the compare object function in PowerShell, and this week we're going to be looking at some code that I have on GitHub, which was from a MS SQL tips that I wrote, and there is another contributor, Matthias, and he posted some code on this repo as well, so you can definitely check it out. I'm going to discuss the comparisons of these and where I would use one or the other. In most situations, compare object is pretty quick, but in this case, when I'm looking at specific code or whatnot, there might be a context in which I use this. There is, of course, a drawback of this. So in compare MS SQL Objects, which is one of the functionalities, you'll see that there's a couple of procedures. In this case, I'm just using this function, and again, Matthias posted other code, so I would check out that other code as well. But in this case, I'm only looking at these MS SQL Objects. So we have procedure 1 on the left-hand side and procedure 1 on the right-hand side. The only difference is that there's been a slight change. So think about if we change the code. In this case, the code is exactly the same output. It's just different how we're accessing this code. And we see that it does a really good job highlighting when we have a situation in which, let's say, you have the same exact line numbers, and we've changed some code within those line numbers. That's the strength of this. Unfortunately, there's a weakness of this, and there's a drawback, and that's when we don't. Let's say we add a bunch of code to it. And that's where I think compare objects, in my opinion, is a lot better. So as we see in this example, it's the similar example, except what I did with this newer procedure, so actually older procedure based on date, is I actually wrote out a bunch of more information. This time I'm getting the data table database, I'm getting table name, table schema, I'm also saying where table equals our table, etc. And we see that's totally different than this and how that impacts it. And that's because while it has the same beginning and it highlights that, it does not have the same ending. We see where it captures the differences, but the end is still present here in this one on the left, and the end is present here on this one on the right, but because it's further down, it says that's different. And so while this might be useful in cases in which, let's say, there have been additions to the file on the basis of a file, if we have changes within a file, it's going to be less effective. By contrast, let's look at last week's example. We had compare object file1, file2, include equal, and if we remember the scenario, there was line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? And then in the other file, there was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, we do see that PowerShell catches that there's equals those lines, even if they're in different places, but they're still equal. However, it does identify where there are differences. So the way that I would use this functionality, if I needed it in this kind of case where I still wanted it to not highlight where there's equals, that is, then I would have to order this. So I would order this by 1, 2, 3, 4. We see what it would do is that would be on the left, and then we would see 5, 6, 7, and that would be both on the left and the right. And then, left and the right. I'm right, left blind, you can tell. And then, of course, line 8, 9, 10 would be on the right, whereas those would not be on the left. So these functionalities can be useful, but it depends on the situation. And this one here was used in situations in which there was a change. The way that I use this, there was a change specifically to specific lines, and that's what we were looking for in this case when I was using this. Whereas this is good if we still want to highlight the lines that are the same, even if they're in different places. So again, that ending line, that end and end actually line up. And so that's one of the advantages of using this functionality over this functionality.